What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Don't Give Up the Ship podcast. This is episode 60. And today I'm talking to a friend of mine. We've known each other for 18 years. And he was a junior officer on board my very first submarine. And then he goes through his career progression. It involved following his first sub tour. He did a shore tour. At the end of that, he did a year in Afghanistan, and then he got out of the Navy. And then his path led him towards seminary and becoming a pastor, and then eventually led him back into the military. He missed being in the Navy and came back in as a chaplain. And this is something that was requested by a listener, as well as something I kind of had like bumping around in my head is talking to a chaplain. And he's a guy I know that not just is a chaplain, but has a really interesting career progression that I thought could not only he could not only address all the chaplain things I wanted to talk about, to basically bring some light to the program so that people kind of know what's available there, because there's a lot more than you think, and the path to becoming one, if that's something someone's interested in, which is what the listener requested. And then the last thing was the leadership stuff. We kind of talked about how he's seen things change, some of his exposure when he was with the Marines to different styles of leadership and stuff like that. So check it out, and I hope you guys enjoy it. Awesome. All right. So like we talked about before, we'll start with your background in the Navy, which is extremely unique, and I'm interested to talk about that. And again, that's kind of how we know each other from the beginning of your time in the Navy, and then how you arrived at where you're at right now.
Sweet. Yeah, man. It's been a long and winding road. So yeah. I commissioned in 99. Feels like forever ago. And I joined the submarine force. So, I did my schools right at the beginning, power school, sub school, all that. And I joined the Louisville in 2001. Mm-hmm. She was out on Westpac at that time, so that was pretty cool. Flew out to Singapore and jumped on the ship and just got immersed in what it was like to qualify on a submarine as a JO, which was pretty intense for me. It was more than I thought it would be. For sure. But it was fun, and it was good timing, actually, because, we were out at sea. We could do a lot of stuff. Yep. So there we were. Did that. Did another deployment with Louisville before I left. That one, you were there for that one. That one was awesome. And beginning of OIF.
Yep. That was my very first deployment ever, actually.
Really? Yeah. I don't know. That's a pretty good one right there. It was long. I remember we were complaining it was long, and then the CO, Jabley, was like, "Suck it up. There's people on the ground. What are you guys complaining about?"
Yep. Yeah. I still show people that boom video. Everybody,
do you?
Yeah, everybody gets a kick out of it. It's still on YouTube.
Yep. I've shown a few people. A few midshipmen that when I was at the Naval Academy.
Nice.
So did that. After Louisville, I stayed out in Hawaii at Nasty Pack. I was doing the PNEO class. I don't know if you know what that is, but
it's like the engineer qualifications.
Yeah. So all the JOs at the end of their time, their first tour, they fly out to DC, do an interview, they take a test and all that kind of stuff. So it's mostly self-study, and I was the teacher. So if you could ever teach a self-study class, that's the way to go.
Yeah, I was going to say, what do you even do if it's all self-study? Yeah.
Yeah, there's a little bit of formal instruction, but most of it they're just on their own. So you kind of grade their work and answer the questions, that kind of stuff. But it was pretty sweet, short duty as well.
I can imagine.
So did that for 2 years and was getting out, but I had 3 years left on my contract at the beginning of my shore duty. So I did 2 years of shore duty. And then my last year I was going to do come back as a super JO, but it was also like OIF, OEF going on. Mm-hmm. And so I got on an IA to go to Afghanistan for a year.
Yeah.
So that was like one of those experiences, not quite like what we were talking about earlier, but one of those experiences where you dread doing it ahead of time, a year away from home. Sounds bad. I got married, like a year and a half before that. Yeah. And really didn't want to leave. for a whole year, but did that, and it turned out to be awesome. I love my time out there.
Yeah. What did you do out there? Because I knew you went, and there's actually a picture of you in the museum in New London. I don't know if you knew that. In the
I've been told that, like holding my daughter or something like that.
I took, because that's where I went to my first shore duty, and I went in there. I think my family came to visit. I'm like, I know that guy.
I was so what does a submariner do in the middle of the desert?
Right.
I did a couple things. I was like mentoring some of the Afghan army guys, the training officer and the security officer. And we were up in the northern part of the country. It was a pretty safe area, relatively speaking, for us. Mazar-e Sharif. So it was a good time. But while we were there, I kind of took over, not really as like the formal contracting officer rep for the army, but just sort of like helping out a lot. So I was working a lot with all the locals. Because they were doing some minor projects on our base and out in town and stuff like that. So I was hanging out with all these locals every day. I have my interpreter with me, so just joking around with them. Hearing about what it was like for them, and just hanging out all the time with them. It was fun.
Yeah, I was going to say that sounds like it would be, if nothing else, a learning experience. Just because like getting to like be in a position to interact with them all the time, like, and just learn what daily life was like, learn how the war was affecting them, stuff like that.
Exactly. It was awesome. It was a good time for me. So the year actually went pretty fast, and I came back and was like, all right, I'm out.
Yeah.
And I just went to a headhunter. I was like, I need a job.
Yeah.
Couldn't get one from Afghanistan. So whatever you got for me works. And I ended up as a business manager in like the western corner of Virginia at a company called ABB. They make power transformers. So it was, it was an interesting experience. It was different type of leadership where, it's like a civilian scenario, and there's no rank structure. There's nothing like that. Yeah. So I had to learn sort of how to relate. It was cool. But
I'm dreading that. Like when I retire, I'm like, what do you mean I can't knife hand people and yell at them? Like, what do you, that's my move. Like, I don't know how to interact with these people.
I like raised my voice. I wasn't really like a yeller ever.
Yeah.
But I remember like I raised my voice in a meeting and everyone looked at me like, what are you doing?
What are you doing?
Like, what's wrong?
Yeah.
Like, all right. Don't do that again.
Welcome to civilian. Yeah.
Yeah. It was completely different. And, it was all right. I liked a lot of it. It was a global company, so I got to travel around to like China, Poland, and Ireland, and like just see some weird stuff that I had never thought I would see, which was a lot of fun. But this sounds cheesy, but I missed the Navy. I missed all my friends. I missed the camaraderie that we had, and I never would have said that before I got out. But when I did, I was like,
nobody ever does until like a couple years in, and then like it's funny. I've seen some kids that got out after their first enlistment on the last submarine I was on, the BN, and on Facebook, you kind of see the change happen. Like the first year, they're just like, "This is the best thing ever," and then like the second year, you start to see them like sharing stuff and like commenting on stuff about how when I was in, and then it's like by like year 3, they're just like full of pride and reminiscing on all the good times and stuff, and it's just like, hey, remember when you said you'd never do that? Yeah.
Yeah, I did all that. And so I got back in. That's what led me eventually get back in.
Yeah. So what was because I feel like you were already doing like minister type stuff, I feel like, when you were still in Hawaii. Is that right?
Not really.
You were like involved in your church?
I was involved in my church.
Pretty heavily? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it was pretty heavily, but like honestly, I don't know how much like I shared this with people at the time, but my life was pretty messed up at that time.
Okay.
Big time hypocrite, like teaching Sunday school on Sundays and like out drinking hard, going to strip clubs and stuff like that with the wardrobe during the week, and some of the weekends. And it was like during that shore duty time, 2 years there, where I started to reflect a lot on all that. And I was like, I can't be two people. I got to choose like one direction or the other. So I chose like, hey, I'm going to go back to my faith. I'm going to go. That's the direction I want to go. Yeah. So I think the people I'm a chaplain now. We haven't got to that part.
Right.
But the people at that time that that knew me then, that really knew me, were probably pretty surprised to hear that I'd become a chaplain. It was a big change.
Yeah. So I guess where I was going with that was I was going to ask is kind of what led you to, cause I didn't know that there was such a big gap. I thought you kind of transitioned from the Navy into like the ministry and then came back in the Navy as a chaplain. So like, what was the path from like, separating from the military and then you did some civilian jobs? Like what triggered you going to school and then coming back in as a, cause were you, and I don't correct my terminology, but like,
yeah.
Cause I know everybody calls it something different, but like you went to seminary and I'm assuming I thought you finished and then you were at a church for a while and then you came in. Is that right?
Yeah.
Or am I just speculating?
No,
okay.
You got it. And that's actually part of the like process and requirements to come in as a chaplain is to work for a little while. But I think for me, it started, like looking back, of course, like just sort of seeing and feeling that struggle, that tension of like, hey, professing one thing, living another way, and not being happy with that in my own life. I think I carry that with me still in the way that like I interact with people in the Navy. And that's been just something that was really hard for me. And, try to help people not go down that path. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I imagine those experiences though. And like when you're talking, like, so if I sat down with somebody that has been living that lifestyle their entire life, I don't know that I'd be able to connect with them like I probably would with somebody like you that like, so if I sit down and I need counseling with a chaplain and I'm some like, like standard issue E5 on a submarine, I'm going to connect with you a lot more than, you know what I mean? Because not only do you have my submarining context, but just that lifestyle of like, most 20 somethings are out partying and doing all kinds of hijinks. And it's like, you're going to be able to relate to them on that level.
Yeah. It happens all the time. I'll be like talking to someone, they'll be a little pensive. They're like, I'm not sure what I can share.
Right.
I'm like, oh, that's all you did. Let me tell you like,
let me tell you a story.
and where I'm at now. And that really opens up the door.
Yeah.
But yeah, when we were in Afghanistan, we didn't have a chaplain for, I want to say like 5 or 6 months at the beginning.
Okay.
And so I kind of filled in as the chaplain.
Okay.
And that was crazy. We had like a memorial service that I did. I'm like, I'm not qualified to do this. But here we go. I'll try.
Yeah.
So we were doing all sorts of stuff like that. And, eventually a chaplain came out there, Army reservist and took over. But I think that kind of planted the seed of like, hey, if you do go back, maybe this is something that you could do.
Yeah.
So when I was missing the Navy, working at ABB for a while, making power transformers, and like, this isn't doing it for me.
Yeah.
I was like, and I wanted to go back. I felt like maybe I should explore this path and see if I could be a chaplain. So I moved back to California, went to seminary, and started my degree. Started working in a church at the same time, and just started to get some experience and really try to figure out. Like, is this for me?
Yeah.
Honestly, I felt sort of ashamed of my past. And I was like, man, if all these people, all these like super Christians around me knew my story, they'd probably kick me out of the room right now.
Oh, geez. I can't. Yeah.
No, I don't think they would have, but that's what I was thinking at the time.
Right. And, I was going to say, everybody's got a history, man. Like,
yeah. But, I had to wrestle with that and sort of like, accept forgiveness for a lot of that stuff and move on. But yeah, seminary itself, it's about 3 years, a 3-year degree. So I was going through that time, and I would say around year 2, I felt pretty firmly like, I think this is what I'm supposed to do, is to go be a chaplain. I started the process. There's something called the chaplain candidate program.
Okay.
So while you're in seminary, you can kind of contact a recruiter and say, hey, I'm working towards this goal of becoming a chaplain. And they'll work with you through that process, get you some training every once in a while as it becomes available, and just sort of like advise you and let you know, hey, like you need to get more experience before you apply, or you're kind of weak in this area or that area, and they kind of guide you through that process. So it's called like the chaplain candidate program. It's a pretty good thing.
Is it like extremely competitive? Like, cause I don't know how many like quotas the Navy has to fill as far as the chaplain corps goes. So is it like if somebody is trying to come in that way, or even like get commissioned while they're enlisted or whatever, or laterally transfer, is it extremely competitive to get into?
Yeah, it goes up and down. Right now it's not too hard.
Okay.
As long as you meet the requirements.
Right.
At that time, it was sort of on a downward side, so I was pretty nervous about making sure that I hit everything.
Okay.
But the chaplain candidate program, that's not hard to get into. That's a pretty win-win sort of situation for both the chaplain corps and the person to sort of fill each other out.
Okay, yeah. So you're just like kind of on hot standby, and then when they have a quota to fill, they look at like who's the most competitive, and they're like you.
Yeah, and then they got some history on you. You can go to so there's also there's a chaplain school. I think it's like 8 weeks long, and you can go to the first 5 weeks of that as a chaplain candidate, so they can kind of see you in that environment as well, and hear what you're about. That sort of stuff. Yeah, so I did that. I was working at a church out in California. Worked for actually 2 churches. One was larger, where I was just like one of the pastors on staff, and then the second one was smaller. Their pastor had gotten sick actually and had to step down, and they were just looking for someone to fill in the gap for a year or so while they tried to find someone else. So I jumped in and got to preach every week for a year, which was
nice.
When you're first starting out, that's the thing.
It's
I think
different.
Yeah, people get nervous about.
Oh yeah, public speaking, man. I was an A school instructor, and then I was the SEL for the last year I was there, and so I was in front of 30 staff and 150 students multiple times a week, and then just instructing in front of like 30 students was like a little nerve wracking at the beginning, but then I was like standing in front of the students, and then I'd speaking at graduations and stuff, and it was just like the other services on the base would come ask you to be a guest speaker, so it was nerve wracking.
Yeah, it's cool. But once you do it a little while, right? It kind of fits in. And
luckily for me, and I say this a lot on the podcast, luckily for me in the student environment, I quickly realized that kind of the dynamic, like the way the students looked at me as a senior chief, that like they thought I was a superhero. So it's just like it became really easy because I don't have anything to be nervous about. I could like they think I can do no wrong. So it's I wasn't being judged in the same way, but then I went to the Senior Enlisted Academy and stood in front of like 400 senior chiefs, master chiefs. Like that, I was probably the most nervous I've ever been in public speaking.
Oh, they don't care anymore.
Yeah. Those guys will judge me to no end and destroy me and make fun of me. So yeah, I was a lot more nervous for that. It was good though. It was a good experience.
It's good times. I did that. Yeah. So I did that for a year and then I came back in. 2000. So this is like 2014 now. Okay. Came back in as a chaplain and started off with the Marines. I don't know if you knew this or if everyone knows this, but the Navy chaplains are chaplains for the Marines and the Coast Guard as well.
Yeah. Okay. I didn't know about the Coast Guard. I was pretty sure that they were for the Marine Corps.
Yeah.
So that's interesting.
Yeah. So that was pretty cool. Started off with 1st Marine Division and 1st Recon Battalion. I did that for a year. And then I was with 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines, which is an infantry battalion. And I was with them for about a year and a half. And both of those experiences, they were awesome.
Well, yeah. What was that dynamic like where you come in and you're wearing like submarine dolphins and they're like looking at you like, who is this dude? Like, did you have any like interesting conversations about like how did you end up here?
Yeah, no, it's funny because I don't know if you remember, I went to dive school too.
Yeah.
And so I had my bubble. And and I had my dolphins, and from a distance they're like, is that guy like recon, like an old school recon guy? Because I have a different different warfare device now for recon,
right?
Where the bubble looks different at least. And so they see like this old silver bubble and something else from a distance that they don't really know what it is, and they're like,
who is
Chaps
this
recon?
Dude?
No, I'm not a recon guy.
No, I'm not that cool. Yeah.
But yeah, it opened up, especially with the officers there. They had tons of questions. How'd you get here? And so like kind of like what you were talking about, relatability. Yeah. It was just like instant relatability, instant.
Yeah, you have like actual real life like tactical experience in a community, like doing what the military does instead of you know what I mean? Like I feel like there might be some young chaplains, if they came straight in as a chaplain with no prior experience in the military, that would have a hard time connecting with the guys that they're there to take care of.
Yeah. I mean, if you're coming from church to the military,
right,
there's just some things to learn.
Yeah.
And so, they're like, oh, this is his first tour. Who's it going to be? They feel a little bit of comfort. they're like,
right.
I don't know
it's
what he
easy
did before,
to connect
but
with you. Yeah.
whatever that weird thing is on his chest, he did something. So
yeah. Yep. Got a rack of ribbons and some pins. It's like, okay, this guy's done some stuff before he came here. So yeah. That's
so
cool.
yeah, that was a lot of fun. I think my time with the infantry was really cool too. The Marine Corps' approach to leadership is different.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate that, man. I love my time on the submarine, and I think if I could do it all over again, I'd still do submarines. But
right.
I really fell in love with the Marine Corps as well when I was out there with them.
I've said that for a long time, that I feel like I would have been a better fit, because I got to interact with a lot of the Marine Corps when I was an A school instructor, because they had it was an Army base, but it was a joint schoolhouse.
Yeah.
So they had like the food service schoolhouse and a couple of other Marine Corps things there. And there was a master gunnery sergeant there that was the senior enlisted for the food service school, that went through the chief season in Iraq with a corpsman put him through it when he made gunny. Yeah. And so like he would always hang out with us all the time, and we would involve him in all the chief stuff. And he was amazing. And I learned a lot about the Marine Corps when I was there, and I interacted with the juniors, and it was like, you had everybody on a base representing every service except for the Coast Guard. We had like a joint service instructor, and we'd see some like advanced culinary students come through for the flag aid program, but that was it. There was only a handful of coasties rolling through there. But with the Marines, it was like they were the only ones that I never had to say anything to about their uniform. They were the only ones that didn't salute me when I was in my khakis, because they said, "Good afternoon, Chief. Good afternoon, Senior," like every time they saw me. And it was just like I know that like they can cut loose and be wild, and they're not like built at the basic school out of spare parts of like infantry. You know what I mean? Like I know they're not robots, but whatever they do when they indoctrinate junior enlisted into the Marine Corps, it's just like they've got it right. Like they're doing something extremely right, where it's like the pride they have in being a Marine, the pride they have in their uniform, the military bearing, the professionalism, it's just like unmatched. It's not even close. Yeah, blew me away.
Yeah, I feel bad saying that now that I'm in the Navy, but
hey, it is. Right. I call it how I see it. It's like because I harp on it all the time, and it's something that like which this will blow your mind. So the kind of dude I was when you knew me on Used to Boat, it was like when I got to my first shore duty, about a year in, my chief figured me out, and he put me in charge of a bunch of people. And when he put me in charge of a bunch of people, I couldn't be like angry and bitter and need a haircut all the time and not take care of my. So I reverted back to what I did when I first joined, like in boot camp and A school, where like I was the shiny boots guy, perfectly pressed uniform and a haircut, like doing everything exactly right, because I wanted these kids to see what I was doing and emulate it. Yeah. I didn't want them to be able to point at what I was doing and say I was a hypocrite. So that's kind of what started the turnaround for me, was this chief that I had just figured me out. And so I've always been that guy. The rest of my career, I've always been that guy. Like I was known for my shiny shoes and then boots when we got into NWs, and I was known for like the military bearing and uniform appearance. And I'd harp on people about it, and just trying to get people to like understand why it's important. And it's not the end of the world, but it's like, it's a big deal to be professional and take it seriously and all these things. And it's like fighting the culture that the Navy has is like, I feel like I'm drowning in quicksand all the time, but it's obviously possible because you look at the Marine Corps and it's like, and I'm sure, like I always caveat, like I'm sure there's Marines out there that look like crap in their uniform, but I haven't seen them, so they can't be that common, like I've literally never seen a single one of them. So
yeah, you're right. As a whole, they take way more pride in their professionalism. And right. Yeah, they're an awesome group to work with. That was eye-opening. It was fun. And yeah, I did that, and then I'm just finishing up a tour right now, sort of in between. But I was at the Naval Academy for 3 years, which was also really cool because that's like a melting pot of all these different people, that are coming together. All these different JOs, all these different senior enlisted, who are. God,
I tried so hard to get there when I was going to the A school. I wanted to be a company chief really bad.
Oh yeah. No, it's a great position.
Yeah, they only had a female opening when I was applying for orders. So I was just like, damn it. That was like a dream job for me.
Yeah, no, it is awesome. Like, I mean, just to see like the different backgrounds that everyone brings, different perspectives, and then but they're all like so committed and so focused. However they screen the people coming in, it's good. It's a strong group, especially I would say for the senior enlisted that are there.
Yeah, and you weren't like training midshipmen. You were doing a chaplain role there.
Yeah, so I was a chaplain. Okay. There's 6 battalions of midshipmen at the Naval Academy, and so I was one of the battalion chaplains. And it's pretty cool setup. Our offices are actually in their dorm.
Okay.
So we're just right there on the zero deck of their dorm, and anytime they need to talk or want to talk, they can come by.
That's got to be fun.
Also had the best collateral duty in the Navy. At least that's
what's that?
I was the football team chaplain.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
So of course fun. You have to be at all the games.
Yeah, all the games. A lot of the practices.
Funny. Oh yeah.
In the locker room. Just getting to see kind of what goes into making a Division I team is pretty amazing as well.
Oh yeah, that's incredible.
That was fun. That was good.
That'd be super cool.
But yeah, so just finishing that up, getting ready to PCS. Already moved to my new location.
Yeah, I saw the Facebook pictures of the boxes and stuff. Where you headed?
Yeah, the boxes are gone now, so that's good.
Nice.
And gonna be a flag aide to the chief of chaplains.
Oh, nice.
So not a very like direct chaplain-y kind of role, but a lot of other people that are doing.
God, you'll be so good at that because you're probably the same age as the chief of chaplain. All your experience in the military. I mean, I can't imagine that won't come in handy.
Now, what is funny is that everyone who's making 06 right now is the same age as me. They're like,
I was gonna say, because the other JO I won't mention. I'll keep names out of it, but. Yeah. The other JO that I mentioned, so I'll talk about it later, but the other JO that helped me through submarine dolphin qualifications, man, I saw him. He had completed a command tour like years ago, and I was like, wow, I'm that old? Like, I know. I was like, holy crap.
It's crazy. Yeah. It's crazy to look around and see that even other like JOs who were just getting to the boat as I was leaving, they've already commanded. I'm like, what?
Yeah. Yeah.
They let you command? Are you serious?
Because, there was a couple of them, that I know. Yeah, I know a bunch of guys that were on that boat that did command tours. Yeah, that's nuts. I actually ran into one of our, it might have been after you left, but one of our old engineers is a deputy at one of the squadrons that I deal with all the time. I met him and he didn't recognize me. I'm like, and we were done having our conversation because it was about a ship failed an inspection. And it was really bad. And we had to have like a meeting about corrective actions and all that stuff. And we were done. He was real cool. I shook his hand. I'm like, I don't know if you remember me, once I told him, he's like, no way. Like you could see the like, holy crap. And like the recognition came. I'm like, oh yeah, you do kind of look like that cook from the boat. It's hilarious.
But yeah, man. So it's been a long and a weird path, but I've seen like so much different things, different environments, different styles of leadership. It's been cool.
That's crazy.
I just love being a chaplain now.
I was going to say, we'll get to that. I'm going to ask you about all the leadership stuff for sure, just because you have such a crazy, unique experience that I'm sure created a unique perspective. But like I mentioned before, one of the reasons that this episode popped into my head was I had a kid reach out to me about chaplain corps stuff. And so I'm curious, like I know you have to go to seminary before you come in, and you kind of covered a little bit of the beginning phases of it, but like once you're in and you're commissioned as a chaplain, like what's the standard kind of career path, and like what does a chaplain actually do? Because like all I know, like I mentioned before when we were talking, is like I can go talk to you if I'm having trouble, and you guys randomly show up on the boat and ask me how I'm doing. And that's about the extent of my knowledge. So like, I'm kind of curious, like how you guys like, once you're in, like what's the standard kind of, if there is one, a standardish career path. And then what do you guys actually do?
Yeah. So, about the same that I knew when I was on the boat.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say there's a standard thing. So I mentioned before that, we have, we're chaplains for the Marine Corps and the Navy. So basically, I'm still a lieutenant. We were joking around about that.
Yeah, I was
a lieutenant in.
You were a lieutenant.
Yeah, 2003. So I've been.
You were a lieutenant when I was a third class.
But as a lieutenant, you want to deploy, and you want to be with the Marines for at least one tour, and you want to be with the Navy for at least a tour. That's all. It was like. And then you'll have a third tour in there. It can be whatever you want. So there is no real strict thing. They just try to get people to go to, a variety of platforms and hit a deployment at least.
Okay. And how long are those tours? Do they split them where you do like a couple years with the Marines and then a couple years with the Navy?
Yeah. So it could be, it's kind of strange to me the way we do this. But if it's an operational tour, it's usually like 2 or 2.5 years.
Okay.
And if it's like a chapel duty or not operational in any way, it's usually 3 years.
Okay.
So I think that's probably backwards of what most most things would be.
Yeah, a little, but I mean, you guys have kind of a unique job. So.
But yeah, it is unique, and everybody actually. Most chaplains that I know want to deploy. They want to go out and
for sure
and do that, and there's just not a lot of opportunities for it. So I think that's why it's shorter that way, is to try to give more people a chance to go out and do stuff.
That makes sense.
So yeah, that's what you do as a 03. Same thing as a 04. Try to deploy. Try to be with the Marines once and the Navy once, and then after that, move into different supervisory roles. And it's just a pretty small community. Yeah. So there's not a lot of like standard pathways after that.
Right. So what's if you're in a deployable unit, like what's a day in the life?
Yeah. So a day in the life for me, and most chaplains that I know kind of take the same approach, is just get out wherever the people are. Like if it's with the Marines and they're shooting on a range, you go to the range, and if we can't shoot, we're not combatants, but you watch.
Right.
And you spend time with them. Or if they're doing a hike, you hike with them. They're spending a few nights in the field, you do that. So I would always go out and try to find like the harshest sort of option available and do that one. Just to let them know that I'm there for them. And that I don't like see myself as, exempt or better than them in any way.
Right.
And those are like those random showing ups that you probably have experienced at different times. And when I'm doing that, I'm just letting people like see me and hear me talk a little bit. I'll just hang out with people, and that's it. Just small talk and move on, and kind of just let them know who I am, so that if something pops up and they need to talk to a chaplain, they don't feel like it's a stranger. They don't feel like it's someone they have no idea who that person is or anything about them. They know a little bit about me, and they might feel a little more comfortable.
Right. And it's like an approachability thing. Like I think one of the most valuable things I learned as a chief was I kept getting told I wasn't approachable, which I know is shocking to the world at large, but I'm a passionate dude, and sometimes that comes across as aggressive or like I'm yelling, air quotes, even though I'm not, Yeah. And so I had to kind of go out of my way. Like I would just walk around the submarine and go sit down and kind of like go to the torpedo room and just like coke and joke with the guys down there.
Yeah,
like,
exactly. Same thing.
When I'm the duty chief, like just go joke around with the watchstanders and hang out for a little while, so that they know it's like, if you got a problem, some kind of an issue, something comes up, it's like, come find me. I will fix it. I will take care of you. It's not like, yes, I am that passionate dude that can get a little hyped up about some stuff, but if you come to me with a problem, I'm gonna help you. Like it's about you, and it's about me helping you. And I want you to know that I'm that resource. And so like, I feel like that's a super valuable leadership principle, is just like, just spending that time, like just walk around the ship when you have time, which I know like on a lot of operational units for guys like me, it's like, there's not a lot of that bandwidth out there. But like when I had a Saturday duty day, or when we were at sea and, I'm off going on a Sunday, and it's just like, I go walk around and talk to guys and joke around and stuff. Or I'm doing my zone inspection, I'll just hang out in the space for a little while.
Yeah. So think about this, that if that was your job, that's my job.
Yeah.
To just do that. And it's freeing.
That sounds
it's not
awesome.
Stressful at all. Because you probably feel this tension of like, oh, I want to talk, but I got this other thing I really need to do.
Yeah, sometimes. Well, I have, especially with my guys, like on my last boat, I was essentially the ACOB. So I had like 900 collateral duties. I was staying in 8 hours of dive every day. I was at all the meetings, the ops brief, all that crap, because I was a department chief. It was like I had a 10% of my day was dedicated to my division if I was lucky. Like there were days where I just came and made sure the galley wasn't on fire and just checked in and was like, do you need anything? Okay, I'm going to the rack. Because it was just because like we were doing a BSP the next day and I was a topside line handler supervisor. Like it was nuts. Yeah. And I kept telling my cob, I'm like, bro, can I get like 2 weeks off the watch bill just to like catch up on paperwork audits and like do my actual primary duty that I'm being paid for? Can I I just need a minute, like even, or put a kick out on the watch bill for once in our lives, like something. Cause I always felt that pressure to like my division was first. I felt like a bad chief cause I was just like so overwhelmed with all this other crap. And it was just like, I made the mistake of being productive and being reliable. And so it was like, I had to go do all these other things. And of course, everything else is more important than the galley as long as there's hot food on the steam line. So
until there's a problem, everything's good, right?
Yep. Everything's fine. No one cares about any of my admin or inventories or any of that crap. All they care about is that there's hamsters on the serving line. So I was extremely lucky with the second class that I had. He just made first, which I was really, really happy about. But yeah, he put it on his back, man. Like I could not have succeeded without that kid. So I'll talk about him. I tell you, I talk about him a lot. I got extremely lucky.
Yeah, man. That's cool. I mean, that's what I do. So that'll be a normal day. Kind of spend maybe, like half the day doing that. We do have our own little bit of paperwork. So I'll do a little bit of that. In the other half of the day, and then just meet with people who have set up an appointment or whatever.
Yeah, I was gonna ask about that too. Like, what if any? Like, I mean, I gotta imagine there's some, but like what kind of training do you guys go through for the counseling part of it? Because that's kind of like operational chief on the boat. Like, that's what the chaplain is to me. Like, I'm like, we got mental health, we've got fleet and family support counselors, and we've got the chaplain, and those are my resources. And so if I'm using you guys as a tool, it's like, that's kind of the one where schedule an appointment with Chaps. Like I've done it. I got cheated on and got a divorce, like probably, I mean, it's been over a decade now, but I was a hot mess. And so I went and talked to the chaplain, and then I scheduled some other counselings just to like have an impartial person talk to me. But, and it helped. So I'm just curious, like what kind of training you guys get, and kind of how does that, without getting into any details, obviously, like how does that work?
Yeah, so some of the training is standardized. So that chaplain school training, or chaplain school pipeline or whatever that I was talking about, that's 8 weeks long. They take a portion of that to talk about some of the unique things, I would say, to the military. They focus a lot on kind of like suicide intervention, that sort of counseling. But beyond that, most of it is just whatever you do in seminary. Okay. And that could vary a lot. Like some people, when they go through seminary, they will have an emphasis on counseling.
I was going to ask, is there an emphasis on it in the curriculum?
Yeah. So it totally depends on whatever you've chosen. For me, mine was more in pastoral care. So a lot of that would overlap, but really like straight up counseling classes, I only had one.
Oh, wow.
So that's probably the lowest that you would get. Everyone's at least
crazy to me, because I feel like that's probably the majority of what you do, even if it is in those interactions you have while you're putting yourself in like you're finding the situation that you like, hey, I should be here on the range today or whatever. Like, when you're having those conversations, it's like you're trying to at least open a door to them coming to talk to you. And so I feel like that's most of what you do.
Yeah, no, you're right on. And so we will do some stuff as a chaplain corps where like every year we have annual training that will focus on different different things. So like over time you absorb a lot of things, and you always kind of have help, especially when you're starting out. Like there were some conversations that I knew I was getting into at the very beginning, and I was like, man, I don't know how to deal with this. This is
I feel like I would be like pretending to be a counselor, like I'm trying to fake it till I make it, which is a dangerous thing in that type of
when it's like somebody's life, right?
Yeah. Like, I don't really know what to do. Yeah, I feel like I'd panic.
So I definitely had some of those moments of like, oh man, this is not going to go well.
Right.
So I had people I could reach out to and sort of like help me out beforehand and say, hey, think about these things. But you'd be surprised, like I do a lot of counseling, and it doesn't take that long to get comfortable with it and to really understand how to help people out.
Yeah, and that's something, I don't know, I've always wanted to look more into it or take a class or something, because I've always had this fear of, like, we talk a lot about like mental health awareness, like in the last probably 3, 4, 5 years. And it's, as a chief, they're like, always check on your people, talk to them, ask them questions. It's like, I have so many things going on. Like I have so many things like overwhelming me just to get this operational submarine to sea that when am I going to be their counselor too? Right. So I generally would try to outsource that to people like you and Fleet and Family Support and everything else. But there's times where it's like I'm on deployment. I don't have any of those things. So now I'm their counselor. I'm effectively a parent. So it's like, what do I do here? And it kind of also like, how do I want them to have a conversation with me, but then I have this fear of like when a sailor engages me and says, I'm struggling mentally and I've thought about hurting myself. Yeah. Okay, what do I say there? Like, because I feel like there's a chance, and I feel like there are probably junior chiefs out there or even first classes or whoever struggling with these interactions and maybe saying the wrong thing because they panic or they feel really uncomfortable or they just don't know what to say. So they're just like, just get back to work or something. So they come off as like super insensitive. And it's just like, I feel like almost like we all should have training on it to some degree, but then like agencies like you and everyone like that, it should be more involved and formalized kind of thing. Cause it's just like, it scares me. Those interactions scare me. Like even now today, like I feel like I have the experience and knowledge to navigate some of them, but like at some point I'm just going to be like as empathetic as I can and be like, look, man, we need to go talk to Chaps or we need to go talk to Fleet and Family or mental health, like the embedded mental health guys. Cause I think
I mean, it's always comforting to know that there's other people you can go to, but like you said, if you're at sea, there is nobody else.
I have zero resources.
It's you. And, I always tell people that like the biggest thing you can do is listen. And usually when we're listening, we're not really listening, right? We're thinking about the next thing we're going to say. We're thinking about our response.
Yep.
But if you just like slow down and listen to somebody and they know that you're actually like, they know if you're really doing that or not.
Yeah. They can tell.
They hear that you're listening. It helps more than you realize.
Okay.
And, just help people like kind of unpack what they're thinking and feeling. And it's an uncomfortable conversation talking about suicide, talking about thoughts of killing themselves, but just sort of like letting them talk freely about it and just listening. And when you hear something that is kind of a reason to live, mention it at the end and say, you mentioned that, you were thinking about your kids in this, like how are, like, tell me more about them, and just try to get them like refocused on their reasons for living. If they're talking to you about it, their mind isn't made up that they want to do it. They're struggling with it. And so they want to hear, they want some help.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, listening and just helping them out with the small stuff. Like, when someone's really struggling with suicide, it's like everything in their life is against them. And no matter, they can't get ahead. It's like they try to do well in this area and boom, they get crushed. They try to do something else and boom, their car battery died. It's like everything doesn't work.
Yeah, you can't win. Yeah.
And so when you do one little thing to help them out, it's just like one little win. And they're like, oh, this person cares about me.
Yeah. And I find that I've had this really, really long interaction with a first class who was dealing with a junior sailor that just like couldn't get right, wasn't performing. And a lot of it, he was very emotionally high and low and stuff like that. And I kept talking, I'm like, you got to create value. Like you got to make this kid feel valued and that he's a contributor to the organization, because a lot of the things she told me was basically that he, all the second classes would like gang up on him because he couldn't get right. So he was dragging them down. So they were basically forming like this tribal accountability function, They were like, you're dead weight, like you're dragging us down. So we're going to ostracize you and make fun of you and do all these things as a sense of like accountability, which doesn't make any sense, but that's what they're thinking.
Right.
And so, and then all these other supervisors, like he was getting counsel all the time when he was on duty and all these other things. He'd be like late to watch and all these other things. And I'm like, okay, why is it happening? Figure out what's going on. Why is it happening? But I'm like, you have to create a sense of value, like that this kid feels like he's a valuable contributing member of the team. Otherwise he's never good. Like they're all treating him like crap all the time. Why would he help them? Like, why would he do a good job on the maintenance that he's helping them with? Why would he write the tags correctly? Why would he do any of those things when all they do is treat him like crap? Like I wouldn't help him either. Yeah. So I'm like, you got to fix that. You got to get them all to rally around this kid and get behind him and push. But then you also need to find out like why all that stuff's going on and everything else. But yeah, that stuff always, it always makes me nervous because I'm always worried I'm going to say the wrong thing. And it's weird because historically I feel like I've done pretty all right, but it's just one of those, especially when you get into the mental health struggles and somebody that's contemplating hurting themselves. It's just like, I feel out of my depth, almost like I need to have some kind of formal training to be able to feel prepared. Maybe I'm just brainwashed.
I mean, no, even me, like as a chaplain, like I'm pretty upfront with the people I'm talking to. I'm like, hey, I'm not a mental health provider. I'm just another dude talking to you, and I'm just going to help you out. And I keep it pretty conversational.
Right.
And they, a lot of people like that because there's a stigma, right, of getting help, like what it's going to do to your career.
Right.
And so I just try to just be a normal person and talk to them.
Well, and you guys have, and correct me if I'm wrong, this is coming from Cobb Qual meeting I had probably a year ago, but you guys have a, what is it called? Where you guys can't, the confident, and it's pretty much bulletproof if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah, not pretty much it is. There is nothing that anyone can share that we can, take to the command or take to medical or anything. So they could be, actively, wanting to kill themselves. And if they don't want that information shared, we've got to come up with another creative way of not sharing the information and still taking care of them.
Right.
But we can't share that information. And it's really cool because, a lot of people, if something's going wrong in their life, it's usually not the only thing. There could be other stuff that's mixed in with it, underage drinking, drugs, breaking some sort of rule, whatever it is. And so they don't want to get help because then they're afraid like, they'll get in trouble. All this other stuff is going to come out. I'm going to get blasted. So they could talk to a chaplain and none of that other stuff matters. It's hey, let's just focus on the thing.
Yeah, that's a really great point. Cause I talked, my friend Amber she was a GM2 that worked for me at the A school she was like a general billet instructor in NMTI. So she separated and went to school to be a social worker. And one of the things, it's like a passion project for her, is she spends times with veterans trying to upgrade their discharge for when, so like say a sailor is having substance abuse issues, gets popped on a test and gets separated with a bad conduct discharge. When you sit down and talk to them, you find out the reason why they had a substance abuse problem was they were sexually assaulted on the ship.
Yeah.
Or whatever, whatever that historical context is. And so she basically gets them documentation, statements, letters, all the stuff together and submits a package with them to upgrade their discharge and stuff. And I feel like she's dealing with the result of more sailors not having that conversation with a person that when you talk to a chaplain, there is zero fear that any of that is going to make it back to anybody ever. And it's bulletproof and legal. You can't make you talk about any of it. The CO can't show up at Chaps' office and say, tell me about what they talked to you about. You just be like, no. And
that was my line. Actually, I would always tell people I'm not on a secret spy mission for the battalion commander. But I do put everything on confidential Chaps on my Twitter feed. So no. And,
that's funny.
But a lot of people come in and they're like, so if I've got this friend and if they were to come in here and say this, would you have to do anything? I'm like, no man, it's just between
you can just tell
your friend and me.
Yeah. Yep. I thought that, I didn't know that. And I was a senior chief at 18 years in the Navy sitting down for my Cobb Qual interview. And that's when I learned that. So that's something that I feel like is woefully misunderstood. I thought that if I walked in, sat down and told you I was contemplating suicide, that you would have to tell people and which, that's a tough situation for you to be in because you feel like you should tell somebody. But if somebody said, I don't want you to tell anybody, but even that, which is an extreme example, but it's that's how bulletproof that confidentiality is. So it's something that I feel like is an important point that people should know, is that when they sit down and talk to you guys, it's nothing leaves that room.
Yeah, no, it's a huge benefit for anyone that's looking for help. Here, I always tell people this too. They always think, do I have to be religious if I've talked to you? I'm like, no, you don't have to be. I'll just ask you straight up if that's a part of your life. If it is, I'll bring it into the conversation. If not, then I won't. And so what we often become, and what, at least in my experience, is sort of the first stop. They know they need to get help. They don't want to broadcast what they need help for. And they want to keep it as small as possible, but they don't know where to go.
Right.
And they don't want to go to their chief. They don't want to go to their they don't want to talk to anybody officially, but they want to go somewhere. So they come and talk to me, and then I can figure out, okay, this is who you do need to talk to. If you do, this is the information that they're going to share with your chain of command. Do you still want to do it? If you do, let me help you.
Yeah.
And so I find that a lot of times, especially with these heavier issues, there's a lot of like handoffs of getting them to the right person in a way that doesn't like tell the whole command what's going on.
Yeah. And I was going to say, it's almost like a soft opening too, where it's like they can get their foot in the door and feel it out and decide whether or not they want to go. Cause it's like kind of like once you go to mental health, you're at mental health. Like if they diagnose you with something and decide you needed to be removed from the ship or removed from duty and whatever, like it's a point of no return already. But it's like a soft opening to like, I can have the conversation at least and feel it out and decide where I want to, cause that's I get so much like feedback. And then I monitor a lot of like groups and chats and stuff about mental health stuff. And it's just like, a lot of it is just like, well, they're going to take my clearance and I'll never be able to do my job again. And I won't be able to be operational. And like all this, it'll affect me and my ability to promote. And it's like, if you're considering hurting yourself, none of those things should be concerns, but who am I to tell you how to think? So it's kind of like, well, okay, if those are concerns of yours, here's a soft opening to kind of just starting the conversation without there being any of those fears of repercussion.
Yeah, absolutely. Nothing to lose. And
that's awesome.
It's an awesome resource. So that's a big part of the job. That's probably what we do time wise the most. That's what people associate, I think, with chaplains the most is that type of counseling.
Yeah. Is there any other like weird stuff that you guys do that like you would never guess a chaplain does?
It's not really weird stuff, but we do other things obviously. So I'm Christian. So if there's a Christian service, I'll lead it. Yeah. If there are people on the ship who are not Christian and they're looking for something else, then I'll do what I can to facilitate like a time and a space for them to do those things. So we're providing for our own and facilitating for others we talk about. And then like the last sort of like piece of that is just advising the command on what is going on. So I don't share specifics with commanding officers, but if like everybody is complaining about something or a person or something's going on that just doesn't feel right, I have like access to the CO, the XO, the COB, whatever. Anyone that needs to know, I can give them sort of enough to try to make a difference. A positive,
like point them in the direction of a problem in general, kind of thing.
So we give them that kind of advice, and if there's like a religious accommodation kind of request or something like that, we'll give them advice. And then depending on the CO, a lot of times they may not see the value of religion or chaplains personally, and so those COs are usually like cordial and nice and respectful and let us do our thing, and they do their thing. But others. Others ask us our opinions on different decisions that they're making. A lot of the soft decisions about like, should I let this dude go on leave or not? Or like what's going on? And they'll ask us what our opinion is on those things.
Interesting. Okay.
So that's kind of like the stuff that we do. There no 2 days have been alike.
I was gonna say that's kind of what it sounds like.
No 2 days are like, and there's no. I tell people this as a submarine officer, I was like, shore duty was cake. Sea duty was impossible almost. Those were the extremes. Being a chaplain is like right down the middle. Like when we're on shore, but there's people always have problems whether or not you're deployed or you're not.
Right.
And there's always something going on in people's lives. So you kind of just sort of like maintain this steady flow. It doesn't matter if you're operational, not operational. It's never as stressful as it was as a JO on a submarine.
For real. Yeah. Standing off the deck in place that cannot be named.
It's never that kind of stress. It's a different sort of stress and it's more constant. So
like steady. Yeah.
It's pretty steady. It's pretty predictable. But pretty awesome too, just to be in a position to, not have to worry so much about some of that other stuff and just focus on the people.
Gotcha. So I kind of want to shift gears a little bit because I'm interested to, especially now that you've had so much time from like away from the submarine community and like where you were a line officer, you were in charge of people and you were a divo and all those things that you did. And then you did the shore tour. It's like the interactions that you had, and I'm sure you have had interactions since with chiefs and NCOs in the Marine Corps and all that other stuff, but kind of some comparisons to like what it's then and now kind of, and like just some of your lessons that you've kind of taken as you've moved on from the submarine community and kind of the differences between then and now, as far as like, I talk a lot, and I guess I better loop back around here and explain, is like, I talk a lot about what, at least I perceive to be, and a lot of people seem to agree with me, and there's been a ton of like visibility on it lately, as far as there being like a divide between junior enlisted and everyone else. Like, and it's the chief's mess and everyone else. Sorry, I phrased that wrong. So like, I initially thought it was a divide between junior enlisted and the chief's mess, as far as just like a lack of trust and faith in our ability to take care of them and lead them, and that we were in fact like pursuing their best interests all the time. And then what I discovered when I started talking about it was the chief's mess and everyone. Like, I had a bunch of officers reach out too and just be like, no, it's not just them. Like, we have issues too, where the wardroom's trying to interact with the chief's mess, and there a lot of trust issues, a lot of like, they seem to be out to take care of themselves and all these other things. And so I've talked about it a ton, and I'm curious to know like what your interactions were like back then, and how you viewed the chief's mess back then, and maybe how you do now, and how that's changed and evolved, not just because the chief's mess in the Navy has changed and evolved, but all of these experiences and you obviously maturing as a leader have affected that.
So it's actually a lot easier for me to think back to what it was like then. And what it was like then was awesome. Like, I remember showing up, and it was those chiefs, like, I won't share all their names, but they kept me out of trouble. They taught me, they were just as instrumental in teaching me about how to be a divo as any of the department heads.
Did you see it that way while it was happening, do you think? Or is it more of like in retrospect, you see that that's what they were doing?
I saw it as it was happening.
Okay.
Yeah, I appreciated it then. And yeah, there was just no question in my mind that, especially like with all the nuclear stuff, like, I only could scratch the surface of what was going on. And not only did they know that, but they knew the people, they knew the culture I was just brand new. And I think it would be pretty arrogant to show up and think that, that I would know anything compared to them. So it was really easy for me to trust them and to learn from them. I think, like, as I look at other JOs and myself, reflect back on my time, you learn pretty quickly. So I felt like when I showed up, I was clueless. And when I left, I knew a lot about at least that particular sub. And I knew a lot about the people. I knew a lot about how things worked. And my impression of the chief's mess didn't really go down over that time. There were a few.
There always is.
Even in one of them.
I went to a special project submarine, which I'm sure you're familiar with. And it was like the super chief's mess. Like, it was all second tour LCPOs and senior chiefs. And then
that would be cool.
There was a handful of us that made chief while we were there, and I was one of them. And so it was like Chiefs Academy. I mean, I had a cob that was a third tour cob and had been a CMC. And then we just had all this experience. And even there was a couple of knuckleheads, you know what I mean? So like, but it was like, there weren't many, and they got put in check really, really coughly. But yeah, there's always a couple knuckleheads.
Yeah. So there's always some of those, but for the most part, man, I love those guys and couldn't have done my job without them. Nasty Pack didn't really have a chief. When I went on that IA, there was a group of us that went. We had a few chiefs that went with us, and that was a completely different dynamic. Though there were no junior enlisted with us.
Okay.
So it was just them and us, and I mean they were awesome at what they did, and loved having them around, and they could just like make stuff happen.
Yeah. We're like the dudes in prison that can just get stuff, and you don't know why or how, and you don't want to know. And
I was
that's just
this is what we need. I know you got to do some stuff to do it.
Yeah.
Can you
I don't want to
know.
Just get it here by this time. Okay. Roger that. Especially with me being a supply guy.
Yeah. I'm sure.
I've compromised my integrity. I'm just kidding.
But that's what it was like then. And, so I have like really high, memories, like really good memories of almost all of the interactions I had with Chiefs back then. Now it's different. Not so much. It's like hard for me to comment on if Chiefs are different, but I'm a chaplain, and I know they act differently around me than they do around everyone else, because I hear about how they treat like some of their people.
Right, and that's what's been terrifying for me is like I get a ton of stories relayed to me via Reddit or email or Facebook Messenger or whatever, and if 10% of them are true, like it's terrifying to me that this is the state of the Chiefs mess. And so that's the kind, and I'm sure you hear a lot of those types of stories.
Yeah. I mean, I hear it a lot. And sometimes it's like so shocking to me that I'm like, this can't even be the same person. So I don't know how like true it is. But like you, I'm like, yeah, even if just a majority or like a minority of these stories are true, then, and I'm assuming there are, when there's enough smoke, there's a fire there. Right. And I'm like, that's a disappointment. To see that. And so I see that, but it's hard for me to know, like if I would have talked to like some of the junior guys on the sub back then, if they would have been saying the exact same stuff that I'm hearing now, it's hard for me to really be able to tell the difference.
Yeah. And that's kind of one of the things I try to explain quite a bit is the perspective difference from being a junior enlisted sailor and being a senior enlisted sailor, and the change that happens where, you always hear the jokes like about guys when they were a cool first class and they make chief and, bro, you've changed. You didn't used to be like this. It's like, of course I changed. Like, and here's why. And I spend a lot of time, like, I don't like the fact, and I've had discussions with other chiefs about it, and I kind of push them on almost none of what we do. Almost. There are some things that need to be kept behind a closed door or under the veil of whatever. But a lot of those things have to do with like, you require an almost intimate setting to have a certain type of challenging conversation, or like, especially during the like final night chief season event stuff, like people get vulnerable and emotional during some of the events. Yeah. And that doesn't need to be viewed like it's a television series. Yeah. So but it's a really small amount of stuff. And there's a lot of stuff that I think could be explained and should be explained. And I spend a lot of time explaining it on the podcast, because I think that when left to their own imagination, junior sailors make a lot of leaps and assumptions about what's going on in the Chiefs mess and why things happen the way that they do, instead of a large portion of what is viewed as us looking out for our own interests or hating junior sailors or just being all around the evil empire is just misunderstood. And I try to explain a lot of that and have those conversations. And I find that when I do, a lot of time, like I've done it during interviews with like first classes that come on the podcast and talk to me about it. And a lot of them are the guys thrashing certain things on Reddit that I'm like, hey, come have a conversation with me and let's talk about it. And I'll explain a lot of this stuff to you. And I've also done a bunch where I've had a bunch of other chiefs on and we've talked about things that happen, like we're in the Chiefs mess, and kind of to pull the veil back a little bit and like, look, this is what's really going on in there. And this is why and how. And there's a lot of times that we're put in an impossible position that we have to do something that makes our skin crawl. But when the CO says go in that direction, we're going in that direction, even though we told them it's a bad idea. Like we have to own it, go out there and make it happen. And so it's like, but we're the ones that bear the brunt of the criticism and vitriol when something like that happens. And it's just, it is
nobody
what it is.
Likes being told what, like, even though we're in the military, we don't really like being told what to do.
Right.
And if you're the face of that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's our pack to carry. And I 100% get that. There's always going to be a certain amount of that where it's just like, look, this is just, that's why anchors are heavy, man. Like, live with it. This is what we do. So, but I think there's a lot of it that can be explained and should be explained. And I spend a lot of time doing that on purpose, but there's a lot of stuff that happens that I'm just like, and that's the whole purpose of this podcast, is to address the issues of leadership development and education, because there is no formal curriculum. There's no effort or resources put into it, really. So all these junior enlisted sailors go through their career up to the point of making chief with zero formal leadership education and training. And then you're wondering why they're struggling to like adapt to the role of being a chief on said unit, you know? And
that's exactly what I was thinking too, because, 43-year-old lieutenant looking back and seeing like these people, these young chiefs who are just, they go through chief season, whatever.
Right.
And I'm like, for some of them, like you said, they have not led at all. They haven't had a good chief over them in the past. They just haven't been in a situation, maybe based on their rate or the unit they've been attached to, where they've had an opportunity to lead in a way where they could get feedback and mentorship and development.
And that's the mechanism. Like that's our leadership educational model is hope for the best. Like I hope you get a good mentor, and I hope that you get the opportunity to be an LPO, and I hope that you're put in a position operationally to lead sailors. Yeah. Hopefully, maybe. And then it's a quota driven system. So you got guys making chiefs because they can fog a mirror, like you'll see like career, like when the quotas come out, you'll see ratings where it's just like 100%. It's like, that shouldn't even be possible. Like that shouldn't even be real, but it's a quota driven system. They need to plug somebody wearing anchors into spot X, and there's 100 of those, and there's 100 eligible. We're making all of them. Or there's 80 eligible, and we're making all of them. And it's like, that should not be possible.
And I mean, just being honest, right? Like, to be a good sailor, you could be like the best sailor in the world. That doesn't mean you're going to be a good chief.
100%.
And I've made a case for the people that are in that situation.
Well, but also, so there's that, but I've also made a case for, there are guys that don't want it. I had a nuke mechanic, called him Biff. Great dude. Like he looked exactly like you think he does. So that guy just wanted to turn a wrench, and he was really, really good at it. And he was good he would train and mentor the junior guys on how to be a really good technician, how to be a really good mechanic, but he didn't want to be the engineering watch supervisor. He didn't want to be a chief. He didn't want to do all that crap. All he wanted to do was fix stuff. And he was incredible at it. And I'm just like, why can't that guy just stay a first class and be an incredible senior mechanic and mentor these junior guys on how to be a really good mechanic? And like, we're not like looking down on him because that's how it was. They didn't want him to be the LPO. They didn't want him to do all this other stuff because
there's obviously something wrong with you because you're not.
You're broken because you don't want to be a chief. And it's just like, no, he's not. No, he's not. And like, it's perfectly acceptable to me. And I don't even understand why there's not like, you get to a certain level, like, okay, this is where I want to be. I really, really love doing this. And then like almost like an electrician's an electrician, right? So like in the civilian world, so an electrician's going to do electrician things until they retire, but they're going to get paid more money as they become more senior and become more advanced. And now they're a master electrician and all this other stuff, but they're still going in there and doing things with their hands and doing electrician things. So like, why can't a nuke mechanic like even get paid more money besides just like the yearly pay raises? Because like now he's a master mechanic, but he doesn't want to be in a leadership position. Like, I feel like they should be like, almost like your path should diverge a little earlier than me leaving my career field to be like a cob or a CMC. It's like, I feel like it could diverge a little earlier, because I've had conversations even where they're like, well, who do you think the subject matter expert is on a thing? And I'm like, well, it's hard to explain, because as a young chief, I probably knew more about my rating than I ever did in my entire life, like than anybody. I knew everything. I was in the books all the time, and that's all I did. But on my last boat, like I went to an A school, so there was a little bit of erosion because I wasn't doing the advanced stuff. We were just teaching junior stuff, like the initial accession training. When I went back to my next boat, I got really deep into it because I had an SMI. I had an inspection, did really well on that. And then I immediately pivoted to cob stuff.
Yeah.
And I was removed from it for like 3 years almost. And then I went to the job I'm in now, where I'm the SMI inspector. And it's like, I got to open the book all the time and make sure that I'm grading something correctly, because I was completely removed from it. Like, I can tell you how to go to dive 1 SQ on a BN, but like, I'm going to have a hard time explaining like certain things because I'm like, wait a minute, because the stuff changes. Obviously, like pubs get updated. And so like there's been times
not doing
where
it every day, you're not going to stay sharp. Yeah.
And there's been times even during an inspection where a guy challenges me on some stuff and I'm like, show me in the book. And they show me and I'm like, oh, hey, look at that. And okay. And I'm humble about it because I know I'm just like, if you can show me in the book, I'll grade it accordingly. And they'll look it up and show, and I'm like, oh, okay, look at that. Because things change and I'm just not as up on it. So, I mean, if you find a really hot first class or a young chief, I mean, a lot of them are probably going to know more about a lot of the details than I do. And so like, where does the subject matter expert thing diverge? Because like, if you asked a supply admiral, find me the subject matter expert on CS things, it's me. Or it's the TICOM CS, right? Because we're immersed in it, or we should be. And the TICOM guy's a master chief. I'm telling you right now, I could find a half a dozen chiefs in 5 minutes that know more than he does, and that know more than I do. And so it's kind of like, where does and should that path diverge, and should it be okay for those guys to just go do that thing, so that you don't end up with people in leadership positions that shouldn't be, because he doesn't want it. He just wants to turn a wrench, and I'm
first class and teach everyone else how to do that job, and it's awesome.
Yeah. It blows my mind.
Yeah.
How did it change at all too? Like I'm trying to get, there's an Army warrant officer I'm talking to that was a corpsman for 9 years.
Okay.
And a couple other people that I know that I'm trying to get other services on the podcast to talk about how make the comparison. Like, so like NCOs in the Marine Corps, what's different, and like, what are some like leadership lessons you pulled from interacting with those guys?
Yeah, I think that, an E6 is an NCO in the Marine Corps, and they're really intentional. Like, I mean, at every level, they're telling them, hey, you're a leader of everyone below you.
Right.
And almost to like a fault, because I could hear in my office, I could hear someone yelling, I am a corporal of Marines. Like, oh, this is going to go well.
I kind of understand it in a way because of the way their units are structured and stuff like that, like small unit leadership. I talked to an EOD chief and a spec war tech about that kind of stuff, like how that functional leadership happens in a small unit. And I can understand why it's necessary, but I've said that too, where like I've had a lot of senior leaders tell me like everybody's a leader. I'm like, no, they're not. No, they're not. I don't want to put that kind of pressure on an E2. Like, they barely know their way around the ship, man. Calm down. Like, they're not a leader. They're not leading anybody anywhere except themselves to the chow line. Like, relax. So like, don't like, it's like you're putting this undue pressure on the sailor to like be a leader of sailors. And it's like, that's a huge responsibility that, oh, by the way, we're not doing anything formally to prepare them for.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's almost like you're handicapping them from the very beginning. And like, by telling them they're a leader, and it's like, I wouldn't have as much of a problem with it. Like you were saying, if they spent more time preparing them, which it seems like all the other services do. And I've never experienced it, so I don't know how robust it is, but I know they have like a PMK or like some kind of requirement before they promote to do some kind of education. Like the Air Force has its own freaking community college. Army's got NCO academies all over the place. So
yeah, same thing with the Marine Corps. That they'll have a class for like pretty much every pay grade they go up.
Yeah.
Where they'll talk about leadership, and like we were talking before, maybe before the podcast, about just like the culture of the Marine Corps and the pride that they take.
Right.
Like, so much of their leadership is driven by that pride and by like their history. And so at every like opportunity, they, from battalion commander all the way down to the lowest people in the battalion, they're talking about that stuff. I'm not like glorifying it. Like, not everybody's into it, right?
I love it, man. I'll glorify it all day. I'm a big history nerd, man. I used to do history segments, and now I'm starting to do history episodes. And because I think that like that's where that pride can come from. I'm not necessarily saying it's all that, but it's a big part of it. Like the looking back at our history and taking pride in the fact that we have all these submarine Medal of Honor winners and all these crazy stories. Like, go read Thunder Below and tell me you're not going to get excited, man. Like the exploits of like Flucky and like Dick O'Kane, like just, it's nuts. And so it's like, I don't think we spend enough time on it. You know what I mean? And it's like, I think that that's something that if we did it similarly, that that pride would kind of almost happen organically. Like if it was built into our DNA at the beginning, like it is then.
Yeah. So like do you guys do like, it's been a while. Do you do like a weekend brief or anything like that before everyone goes off? We don't really do that, right? Like, cause there's so much duty.
Yeah, we kind of, we would do all hands quarters on the pier kind of thing, like every Friday, and they'd be, don't drink and drive or hit your wife kind of thing.
So, yeah, exactly. So the Marines do that too. And I remember going to the first few of those with battalion commander stands up there, and like the first one tells like, on this date 50 years ago, and he like goes into whatever happens, and then everyone's just like, like every eye is locked on him. He's like, hey, what happened, Marine? What happened on this day? And then of course they know, and then everyone's like, hoorah, yeah,
that's awesome.
So there was like stuff like that. There was this other time I remember the battalion commander's like 3 pounds or whatever it was, like whatever weight the resistance is on the trigger of their M4. That's all it takes. But and he goes off on this speech, and I'm like, dude, I feel like I'm in a movie, and like I want to be a Marine. I want to be an infantry Marine right now.
Yeah.
And they do have a way of just connecting, and maybe stuff that we would say in the Navy is a little cheesy, or we just don't take the time, or too busy to talk about. But they'll talk about it. And maybe even dramatically. And I'm like, dude, like my heart's beating a little bit faster.
I think they just don't, man. And I'll give you 2 examples of why I think that it's not as boring or whatever. It's not built into our culture, because I was a chief and then the SEL at CSA school, right? So if you think about it, and I'm very aware of the perception of my career field in the Navy, right? Like we are the butt of a lot of jokes, like in real life, in practice, like people that failed out of other A schools would get sent to us. Like I know, like kind of the way that we're viewed, right?
Yeah.
So if I know that, the instructors know that, and then it eventually gets passed on to the students somehow. And I don't know how, but that early in the training pipeline, they knew that was the perception of them. So you'd have a hard time motivating these students. You had a lot of students there that wanted to be an aviation electrician, and they wanted to be a sonar tech or whatever, and they didn't academically perform in their previous pipeline and got sent to us.
Yeah.
So I got in front of the staff one day, and I was getting so frustrated with it that I just snapped, and I like went off on this rant about how they're all lucky to be there, and here's why. We got 6 Medal of Honor winners. We got Jacob Wasby, who was the first mention of the title chief in relation to rate or rank. And you can ask any chief in the Navy who the first chief was, and they will tell you it was Jacob Wasby, a ship's cook on the USS Alfred that served with John Paul Jones. Like, I win. And then I talk about like Leonard Harmon, William Pinckney, Dory Miller, all got ships named after them, all African-American, all won the Navy Cross for valor. They didn't win it for making eggs. Like, so I would go off on all that. And it was like, I snapped and just lost it and went off on this rant about how they are all lucky to be there. And this is the story that you're a part of now. And this is your heritage. And now you're in it and blah, blah, blah. And I went off on a pretty epic rant. When I was done, like the students were like hyped because that's easy, right? Their Hoo-Yah button is big and shiny and red still. It's super easy.
Yeah.
The staff came up to me and was like, I want to go run through a brick wall. Like, I didn't know any of the, like, they know, like, if you walk up to a standard issue cook in the fleet, they know who Dory Miller is. The end. Like, pretty much universally, unless they've come across my podcast or done independent research or whatever. Like, so you just tell them all these things. It's like 6 Medal of Honor winners, 6. Like, go do the research. And it's just like, it's something that you can do, and you can get them hyped about that. And if I can do it at CSA school, anybody can do it. And I did it at on the BN, right? So like the most boring like version of submarining there is.
Yeah.
I was filling in as the cob for 2 weeks, and I was pretty new to the ship too, so it was kind of nuts. Like the guys didn't know me that well, and it's a long, boring story, but the cob disappeared a lot. So I filled in for him for like 2 weeks, and I went to a brief with the XO. And they kind of do the missile tech briefs, which is who I was talking to. It's like a nuke brief, very formal, very like they have a very procedural way of going about it. They do it very similarly every time to make sure all the boxes are checked, because of course they do. And then at the end, they kind of go up the chain of command. Do you got anything, chief? Do you got anything, senior? Cobb, XO, CO if he's there or whatever. So they got to me, and they had a bunch of like procedural issues recently, and it's very much like the nuclear world where there's a critique and they might have to send a message and all this.
That's a bad word. Right? I haven't thought about that word.
Yeah, man. Well, yep. So that like it's a huge deal when they have a procedural issue with Swiss stuff. Okay. So we were in there, and I'm like, and they had a bunch. They were stumbling. They just had a bunch of issues recently, so everybody's heads hanging low. Everybody's real demotivated. They're like, we got to do this again. We're probably going to screw something up, and then there's going to be a critique, that kind of thing. So I'm like, okay, I know what I got to do here. Let's push this hoo-yah button. So I'm like talking to them about what they do for a living. And if you talk to submariners, it's like, oh yeah, BN guys are part-time submariners. Those guys don't do anything, blah, blah, blah. Oh, you 5 knots of nowhere, punching holes in the ocean. So I'm like in MCC where that's like their control center. And, I started getting them hyped, man. I'm like, you guys know what you do for, like, you guys should not be hanging your heads low. Do you know what you do? Do you know what you're trusted with? Like, you have the power to destroy the world. Like, you are destroyers of worlds. Yeah. Like, that's a huge deal, a huge responsibility that you have to be trusted with this awesome technology and power. And just like went off on this rant about it. And I did a little research about it. I said some stuff I probably forgot, and it's like, I got done, walked out. XO's like patting me on the back. He's like, that was awesome, senior. And I'm just like, it's not because I'm some great public speaker. It's like, I'm not terrible at it, but I'm not the only one that knows how to do this. Like, I'm not the only one that can do this. I understand that my passion for these things is like very, it's a tool that I can use to get people hyped up and to motivate them to do things. Like I understand that knowledge helps too, but the heritage stuff, like, just like you were saying, it's like anybody could stand up in front of a group of people and start kind of going down that road, like that type of a speech that those Marines were making. And I'm just like, that's all it takes, man, to start building that pride into our DNA and like using that as a motivator. I'm just like, it's so underutilized, and it drives me absolutely nuts, man. Cause it's like, it's such an easy, even when people are bitter and jaded, like they have pride in being part of the submarine force or pride in being part of the Seabees or whatever.
Yeah.
And so like that hoo-yah button might be a little smaller, might be a little like dusty and hard to find, but I'm telling you right now, the easiest path to it is through exactly what you described. Like, it's just start mashing that button, and it's like, it works.
Everyone loves a story. You tell a good story.
For sure.
Everyone hooked in, and they're like, yeah, I could be that. That could be us. Let's do it.
Yeah, I did a podcast a long time ago on this guy. They had this, I don't remember. I think he was there. I'm pretty sure he was there. They did a bunch of, like they called them lectures of opportunity when I was at the Senior Enlisted Academy. So it was like you did all your stuff during the day. You're done like 1700, and like 1830, they would have a lecture of opportunity that was like voluntary, and they'd bring in guest speakers and stuff. There's this one guy, and his name's going to escape me because I wasn't planning on talking about it, but there's an episode. It was one of my earlier ones called Leading with Stories. And that's this guy. That's what he talks about is, I think he was a Marine. I can't remember. Anyway, he talks about that, like the power of leading with stories, and gives like really great examples of it. And that was something that like, it was one of those things, like I never really put it together, but I did it because I knew heritage would work, but I didn't lead with stories the way he described it. And so like when I listened to his talk, I would like, it punched me right in the face. And I was just like, oh, okay. Like this, everybody likes the story. Everybody can relate to it. You connect with the people, you draw them in, like the yada, yada. And it's just like, okay, now I get it. Like I can totally use this as a tool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's easy and it's fun. And,
for sure.
I think it's easy even for speakers, like, cause you can tell a story more than you can like rehearse a speech.
Yeah.
And so it just comes out natural. It's better.
And that's how I like doing it too. Like I would, like even when I gave graduation speeches and stuff, or like, when I do the podcast, like I very, very rarely have anything written down. Like when I do, it's like if I do a history episode, I do a bunch of research. So I'll have like an outline. Yeah. And there's a lot of times where I'm like like I'm reading from like an excerpt from something or from a book or whatever. But the vast majority of them, it's like I have an outline with, hey, I need to talk about this thing. And then I just talk, because it's like I feel like when you hear that kind of stuff and it's organic and they can tell that you're just talking to them and it's conversational, that people connect with it a lot more easily than if it's like this really polished professional delivery of a script or something. I couldn't do that even if I wanted to, but
you gotta be
have
yourself.
A really hard time
yeah.
with it. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome, man.
Love it. Any save rounds or alibis, sir? Anything we didn't talk about that you want to?
No, man, it's been
I called you sir again.
With you. Yeah.
Force a habit. It'll probably never go away.
Just call me Chaps. No.
Yeah. That's gonna be the name of the episode.
That feels weird too, right?
Nah, I mean, Chaps is easy. That's like that's what I'd probably call you if I saw you. But or Johnny Utah. I don't know if you saw that in the email, but I remembered.
I'm looking at that right now. I'm like, yeah, I haven't been called that in a while.
A long time. Yeah. Well, yeah, it was really, really good connecting with you again as well. I really appreciate you doing this. I know there was a demand signal just from the question that I got, but also like the information provided, especially this kind of stuff where it's like they can come talk to you, no strings attached. Nothing's going to get told to anybody. I think you guys are probably an underutilized resource from my experience, from my end of it, probably definitely an underutilized resource. Not that like people don't kind of passively know that I could go talk to the chaplain, but I don't think they really understand what they would get if they did. You know what I mean?
No.
So I think it'll be good.
I get that. That's a big part of just walking around. I think
for sure.
If people don't see you, they're not who's going to come talk to you? Right.
Right. Develop a little familiarity so I really appreciate your time.
Hey, it's been great talking to you too.
Awesome,
man. You've come a long way. It's good to hear.
I know, man. It's wild. I run into people cause from back then, like, I remember even on my first shore duty, I was standing base CDO as a first class, and my chief brought me to the Chiefs Club as like bring your right hand man day. Yeah. And our first Cobb at the time, the torpedo man.
Yeah.
He was a CMC somewhere down there, and he walked into the Chiefs Club and almost like fell over because he couldn't believe that. A, I was in the Navy still. B, my uniform was squared away. C, I was a first class. D, I was standing CDO for the entire base, which I was like one of 2 first classes that did it. It was mostly chiefs and officers. And then I was there with my chief as his right hand. He was like, wow, wouldn't have called that. Like,
that's funny.
He almost fainted, I think. It was hilarious. But I
saw him not too long ago, actually.
Did you? Really?
Yeah, the Army-Navy game. He's got a big old beard now. I didn't recognize him.
Oh, yeah. Yep. Yeah, I ran into him a few times when I was in Connecticut, and that was it. And then I think he retired not too long after that. But yeah. All right. I hope you guys like that. Really fun catching up with him. I haven't gotten to have that type of a long conversation with him in a really long time. Great guy. I mentioned it. We talked before the podcast. So I'm not sure if it made it into the episode or not, but we talked about, he's one of the 2 junior officers on board my first submarine that were directly responsible for me qualifying in submarines. And what I mean by that is I went through some pretty rough, I went through a rough patch in my first year. And him and another lieutenant were the 2 that recognized there was something there and kind of dragged me kicking and screaming through the last part of my submarine quals, because I kind of like threw my hands up because I was really frustrated with leadership and my interactions with them, and just kind of felt like I couldn't do anything right. So what's the point of doing anything at all? And I was just like, nah, I'm not doing it. This is stupid. You guys are mean to me and treat me like crap no matter what. And so I kind of gave up a little bit, but he's one of the 2 guys that dragged me kicking and screaming through that. So I just wanted to say thank you again. I mean, we talked about it, but it was pretty incredible that those guys did that. And I don't know that they recognize what they did for me back then. So thank you. I appreciate it. And if you guys need anything from us or have any questions, comments, concerns, not only hit us up, but Chaps' email is in the show notes, so check that out. Or you can hit us up, don'tgiveupptheship@gmail.com. You can Facebook message us, Don't Give Up the Ship Podcast, or you can hit us up on Instagram or Reddit at dgutspodcast, or just dgutspodcast for both the sub and to DM me. Reach out if you got questions, comments, concerns about anything. And I highly, highly encourage all of you to leverage the resource that is your chaplain. Really pretty awesome, and I've used them more than once in my life, and then I've gotten some training from them when I was doing my cob quals, and it's a great resource. Help us out, like, share, subscribe, comment, review, all the things on all the platforms for podcasts and social media. It helps us out to get the word to the people that need it. And that's it. That's what I got for you today. Thank you so much for listening, and don't give up the ship.